with the recording and share the slides. Okay, can everyone see this? All good, cool. Well, yeah, welcome everyone to the first NNIP showcase of 2025. Those who are new or who may be somewhat familiar, these are just idea or chances for partners to share some of the things they've been working on, or other members of the network to hear and engage and get a little more detailed understanding. And if you've been to the meeting, this is like the idea showcase, just a little more relaxed. Slides aren't auto-timed, we have a little more time. But yeah, so with that, I think, Kathy, go into some of the network updates.
Sure. We kept these hopefully short this time to leave more time for the presentations. We always try to slot in the mission about NNIP for anybody who's new to the network or to their organizations, which I don't think I see anybody in that category right now. But we also had a request that we will be working on to share out some slides and talking points about NNIP, which has long been on our list. So that's so that as you are at presentations or at national meetings or other make other connections for NNIP, we can all be talking about it the same way or vaguely similar. We just have some, I think these were mostly upcoming things on the network updates. You should have gotten a note about Buddy Coffee. If you wanted to opt out, that you have 24 hours to opt out still of the Buddy Coffee pairings. This is something that we do every spring. The annual meetings are really great to connect in person, but a lot of people want to connect. Not everyone can go to the meeting, first of all, and not wait a year to connect again. So you'll be paired with someone either new or just catch up with someone you already knew. Everyone, we had a really great response to the AI survey. I forget, we had like 60 answers very quickly. So that was really helpful. We are working on, Cole and I are working on a sort of a learning agenda over the next few months. But what we wanted to start with is a practical introduction. This is basically, I put it like more definitional, like a phrasing, like a landscape review of what kind of AI tools are out there, what we mean by AI versus machine learning versus deep learning versus et cetera. So we just thought we needed a foundation to start out on the other learning sessions to connect more on the method side, more on the internal use side, et cetera, on those pieces. So it's not going to be for everybody if you feel well-versed in AI, but I hope some of you can attend and we'll share that out in any case. Then Cole and Liz Monk have been putting their heads together to have the interns talk. It could be student interns or any interns you have working in your place, to have them share and connect, which I think it will be even more important this year as there's so much turmoil in the field we work in, to have them connect. And the idea is to have them have a group connect in June and have a group and then circle back in August to make new friends, hear about NNIP, think about careers in the community information field. And then just a reminder, we're about to send the registration out. We're a few days away from sending the registration out in Charlotte, and we can send some initial what that agenda is shaping up to be. I know we had a really great birds of a feather session with folks who were doing more longer term nonprofit coaching around data capacity, sort of whether it's a curriculum or a program. Sarah's here from CT Data, and having some of those smaller, more in-depth sessions is definitely something we're looking to do more of. I think whether that's around the environment or if there's other topics you want to come up with. All right. We just had our introduction to our community of practice platform launching in July. We have purchased a system called HiveBright, which is, I think, going to make our lives so much better. It will replace the Google group as a forum, but works like the Google group. Like you can just get emails if you want. But knowledge management, replacing the old website about our internal documents, easier one-on-one connects, and to see who's in the community is 1,000% easier. And also the events and calendar function. So instead of having to really read through the 47 announcements on the Google group, there'll be a calendar that you can look at to know what the events are coming up that are there, amongst other tools like onboarding new staff and things like that. So it's kind of an out of the box, put the components together. We're aiming to launch mid-July so that it's really going to be a part of the September meeting where we can interact and store things. So this, we have purchased this out actually 3 years to really build this out. And I think it's going to be, yeah, we're very excited about it. And just a note that, one of our strategic plans was about goals was around having more influence externally. So Lori from Charlotte presented with AISP and one of their community members at Grantmakers for Effective Organizations last week. Just to call out, hooray, call out for the American Community Survey Conference. I noticed we didn't really even have much to do with these, but Boston, Columbus, and Hartford are presenting because our partners are great. And Urban Institute staff, 2 colleagues will be there. I didn't put the dates on these. That's June 3rd. ADRCon is mid-June. Leah and I both put panels together for the investor housing work and community-oriented governance work with Charlotte. Jeff and from Minneapolis and Sarah and I are putting together a proposal about using voting data. So if you have examples of using voting data and collaborating with the Get Out the Vote folks, which just made me feel better that we are working on that in the world, that we're submitting today. And then these are outside folks we've been talking to just on the national scene, the data folks at National League of Cities, Metro Lab, LISC, the National Disability Institute that Milwaukee just partnered with too, that I'm really excited to share more of that later on, and someone from the United Way of America. So if there's other national groups that you think should know about us, or we should know about them, or we should start to get in contact with, please send those along. We're always excited to networking and making those phone calls are some of my favorite things to do. So now we'll turn it over to our speakers.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, so we have 3 wonderful speakers today. First, we have Timothy Bray from our Dallas partner at the Institute for Urban Policy Research, and he's going to go into the North Texas Quality of Life Survey, which is a multidimensional framework designed to deliver data and information on a variety of areas that are critical to North Texas's future growth. Next, we'll have Zoe Iacovino from MAPC in Boston, she's going to go over their research on measuring the affordable housing gap, which is a collaborative project with Housing Navigator Massachusetts that measures the gap between supply of affordable rental housing in Massachusetts and the number of households who need it. And finally, we'll have Luke Schuster from Boston Indicators. So we got both Boston people represented today. We'll go over their collaborative report with the newly formed American Institute for Boys and Men, or AIBM, on some of the major challenges that boys and men in Greater Boston face today. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Tim.
Thanks, Cole. Just hunting for mute after I switched over screens. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending upon where you're at. Tim Bray, Institute for Urban Policy Research at UTD. I'm going to quickly go through an update on where we're at with an initiative that started last year. It's a broader initiative called the North Texas Quality of Life Initiative. The initiative itself has two pieces. The first one we'll really talk about today is the William C. Short Quality of Life Survey. The running joke is the survey is about 65 questions. So when we call it the short survey, everybody gets confused. The second piece of that is contextual community data. We've got an interest in really kind of highlighting disjunctures between what people think is going on in their community and what the performance indicators are actually showing. Not to suggest that either of those are correct, but to understand that there's a disconnect in many communities. We've got one goal, and that's to improve quality of life for North Texans by informing public policy with actionable, accurate, and timely information. The number one thing that we hear from our city partners, our nonprofit partners, is all of the data out there is old. Our education data is a year and a half old by the time it's out there. We're talking about the quality of schools. By the time we're talking about levels of poverty, we're talking about poverty levels from a year and a half ago. And so getting a better understanding of what's really going on in our communities is the driving force here. We're bringing people together as part of this initiative. So we're bringing people together around the annual report, the actual survey data, to begin bringing members of our university community, members of community groups, civic leaders, and the general public and students together around solutions for issues that we are discovering. We're working with a number of city managers on both tailoring local surveys for their communities, but also talking more broadly about the types of things they'd like us to be asking about. We've got our advanced students engaged in building data tools. Most of these are shiny based, but tools that are designed to help people dig in and understand the data. And then, this is a publicly accessible survey. You can go to our website now and download the data and play with it. We're actually pushing it out to all of our graduate students and our undergraduate students. We've also talked with some high schools about developing civics/stats education curriculum using the survey data itself. So the survey has several components. Obviously, we ask people demographics. We ask people things about their community and their neighborhood. Do you like where you live? How long have you lived there? Do you like your neighbors, right? And not a small percentage of folks can't stand the people they live near, but they also don't want to move. More importantly, we begin to drill into using a exit voice loyalty political science framework. We look at the issues that they've experienced in their neighborhood, what they've done about it, what types of satisfaction they've gotten from the actions that they've taken. And we talk a bit about public safety with questions like, I believe that the police in my community have my best interests in heart, things like that. Civic duty is a big one we've been talking about with respect to voting. Every survey has what we call a cargo module. The cargo module this year, in 2024, the cargo module was about homelessness and crime. This year's cargo module is going to be about housing affordability and access to healthy foods. We asked people about whether or not they intend to move, what would make them want to move, and then what's their outlook on life. Right now, we have running on our website a visualization tool that helps people just dig into the data, look at how trends are performing by county. We've got the ability to break things down by age group, by 5 demographic areas. We'll talk a little bit about what those are here in a second. And then they can, of course, do crosstabs galore. All right. So real quick about 2024 results. 2025, by the way, goes in the field Monday. 2025 survey will be in the field on Monday. We began with a very lofty idea about a scientifically representative sample, and it was a great idea. We wanted to get 2,500 respondents age 18 and up from 500 from each of 5 geographic areas, right? So Southern Dallas versus Northern Dallas County, Tarrant, Collin, and Denton counties. the sort of the core of the North Texas Metroplex. We wanted to get into decent multivariate analysis numbers, so we had targeted 500 per area. So we wanted 2,500 respondents across 206 zip codes in 5 survey districts that comprise together 4 counties. We had a wonderful idea. We started with L2's data on registered voters. So Kathy, your voter engagement data. Now L2 has augmented their registered voter data. About 60% of those in the augmented data set have an email address. About 50% have a cell phone. Unfortunately, I'm at a university that doesn't believe we should email or call or text anyone ever for any reason whatsoever. So we had to do postcards. So we took these roughly 4 million voters in the North Texas area, parceled them out by our 5 survey areas. Then we built samples based on race, ethnicity, gender, and age, so we could construct a weighted sample and wound up with a random sample of, actually it was more than 2,500, it was about 30,000, thinking we would get 2,500 responses. So we went out and did 35,000 postcards. Of those 35,000 postcards, we got 105 responses. Now, my grad student tried to tell me that people don't do mail anymore. And I said, no, people do mail, because I'm an old white guy and I go to the mailbox every day and it makes me feel comfortable in my world to do that. But that's just not the experience that most people have. And sure enough, 35,000 postcards, 105 responses. Now, I will say our 105 responses were perfectly representative of the North Texas area. So not useful at all. We did social media advertising. We got 918 responses that way. We got another 60 to 100 responses from personal outreach. And then we bought a panel from Qualtrics. So we've got about 2,895 good completes that we had to do very little weighting with. They were highly representative. We ran the survey in English and Spanish, not this year, but next year we will likely add Chinese. Of course, it was screen reader compatible, 63 questions, 20-minute completion time, 94% good completes. Again, I mentioned the weighting. We weighted traditionally underrepresented groups. We did cell weighting, so there wasn't actually that much weighting we needed to apply. Our responses were fairly representative. So right now, what we're working on is increasing engagement with students, faculty, community leaders, and government leaders. We have, we're gonna do that slide twice. There you go. We had a major platform shift. We had built in Microsoft Power BI. Power BI changed its licensing agreement. It was going to cost us $60,000 a year, and I could not convince my dean to just shake $60,000 a year away when she already knew such a thing as Shiny existed in R. So we now have a Shiny dashboard in R. That was a quick pivot because we had it all built, and then as we were getting ready to license it, they changed their licensing structure. So 2025, our cargo is housing affordability and food security. We actually have a nonprofit partner with us this year. The North Texas Food Bank is partnering with us. We also have, I should have done a slide on this, but one of the things we're pushing this year is a community partner program. So we've gotten approval to allow nonprofits to post our materials, and they will get a specific QR code. The deal is if they give us at least 100 responses from their QR code, we can give them a cut of data that's just about their respondents. So for instance, North Texas Food Bank, in their more than 500 pantries in North Texas, will be making the survey available. Our goal is to attempt to reach folks that are harder to reach in the population. Now, you can go to our website, ntxqualityoflife.com, and play with the data all you want. But let me tell you some things that are piquing our interest among our civic folks. Everybody who voted in the last election, the last survey went out right before and right after we had 2 waves, the local election. Among the folks who voted and among the folks who felt, so 25% felt that voting in every election was their civic duty. Almost a third of the folks who said it was their civic duty said it made no difference whether what they voted or how they voted. right? So we've got this getting into this concept of this sort of habitual voter who goes because they have to, but feels disenfranchised because their vote doesn't have an impact. One other thing that we found, folks said that it was too expensive or too expensive or took too much time to be involved in local politics, right? So we're beginning to peel the onion back. We're still peeling the onion back on last year's data. This year's survey will go out, like I said, early next week. So with that, Cole, are we holding for questions till the end, or do you want me to take questions now?
We can take questions now.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to kill the slides. There we go.
I might have missed it, Tim, but who's funding this?
We have a three-party arrangement between a private funder, the William C. Short, hence the name, and then there was a match. William put up a match, and it was matched by the university's Office of the President and the university's Office of Research and Innovation. They're looking at, so we have funding for 3 years. So we're in the middle of year 2 right now.
Did you, what changes have you made to the distribution strategy for this year? So
I'm not sending postcards out. I'm saving $19,000 on postcards. I know that much.
Sure.
So we incentivized last year's survey. We had a drawing for $1,000 gift card, 4 $500 gift cards, and $20 $50 gift cards. We've basically quadrupled that. So we've got $5,000 gift cards this year. We basically took our postcard money and put it into incentives. We've hired someone who will be actively managing our social exposure. So as we start to see demographic shifts, and you remember this, Anthony, I don't remember which survey we put out, but we put out Facebook first and then Twitter and then Snapchat, and you could see the average ages change as each wave of the survey went out, right? So we've got somebody who's actively looking at our responses and then managing the targeting in our social media to make sure that we're, if we're overrepresented in Collin County, we'll turn down advertising targeting up there and turn it up someplace else. In addition to the community partner program. So that's the real goal, is to get to communities that are harder to reach, that obviously apparently no one uses postcards, but they may not be browsing social media either. And because we're here in Texas, I cannot advertise on TikTok. So there goes all my youth. So that's that.
Sarah has a question in the chat.
I can see. Let me see if I can see the chat.
See it? Or Cole, can you read it?
I can read it too. I'm taking a few minutes to stretch my legs. But I was going to ask about incentives.
This was all. Sorry, Sarah. This was all online.
Yeah, it was all online. Okay.
Yeah, our goal was to use the cell phone data and the email data that we have from L2 to recruit and target people that way. This time, so we had people opted into the drawing. When they opted into the drawing, they gave us their contact information. Our IRB will not approve us to reach out to them again and say, hey, thanks for responding last year. Would you like to respond this year? So, anything we can do to make sure that no research occurs, we seem to be hell-bent on doing. But despite that, we had 2,900 good completes. So
that's incredible.
Go ahead, Sarah.
No, sorry. I was just really interested in all the different ways that you are trying to make sure that you fulfill the survey responses, get the responses you need, and doing it yourself, not having an outside shop kind of do it. So
yeah,
this is helpful.
Well, and Sarah, there's another city in Texas that is that's doing one, and I think they're hiring Nork, and their budget's well over $1 million a year. And if we can get directionally correct responses that are mostly good, that people will trust, that don't cost $1 million, I think what the bigger question, and this is a paper we're working on, is sort of confronting the reality that the old phone bank / postcard scientifically representative sample may be a gold standard that's just beyond accessibility now.
And Tim,
I was gonna say, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say there's a group called Groundwork DFW that we had used at CPAL that does some canvassing. If you need anyone that they just like hang them on they'll like hang the QR code on a doorknob. They kind of do that thing.
Oh,
So
sweet.
I don't know what you're allowed to do. You know, if you
Nothing.
can't even
Know the
text
answer.
people a QR code, that kind of sounds really lame. But you know, okay.
Leah, did you have a question?
yeah, I was just going to ask. I think at one point you intended this to be a panel survey, so that you're touching base with
Yeah,
the same
and
folks.
so
Or
it's been difficult to build a panel simply because of the hurdles that we're jumping through. What we found now is, Qualtrics had a good deal of trouble delivering on the panel that they committed to. A lot of the others that we're talking to, Cint, some of the other panel fulfillment folks are having trouble with that, being able to target a specific county. If I wanted a representative sample of Texas, they're fine. If I say I need this percent by this percent in Collin County, they struggle with that. And then when you try and divide Dallas County in two, it's even harder.
got it.
Tim, have you chatted with the Data Haven team or the
Oh, no.
or ARC about their? I mean, I feel like they're the kings of quality of life system surveys from the Connecticut.
So yes, we have been inspired. I have not talked to them. We've been, reviewing and looking at instruments and things like that. So they were heavily inspirational without actually having talked to them in person.
And the Atlanta has one. The Atlanta Regional Commission
Mhm.
runs Atlanta Voices too. I was just thinking about both brainstorming about outreach, but
Yeah.
also they have, well, Data Haven has a very community
Yeah.
owned process, which I think they believe helps with response rates too, like
That's
getting
what we
institutional
found.
people on board. Yeah, but it
Yeah,
might.
that's the goal with the community partnerships is, if your pastor's asking you to fill it out, that's a different story than me coming and asking you to fill it out.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think of, Leah, are there other community quality of life surveys still alive? Historically, just a little arc that they seem to like go in waves. Like there used to be a lot of them and then they all got defunded. And then I've heard of a couple cropping up again as people need new
The
frustration
Houston
with.
one's still going on.
The Houston one is, yeah. And there's
Yeah.
about to be a second one in Houston.
Wow.
There's the Houston area survey is still being done by the Greater Houston Council. I can't remember the name of the organization, but there's a university that's getting ready to do and that's one of the reasons their bill is so high is it's a panel design.
It might be an interesting birds of a feather group to get you guys together to
Well,
chat.
and we've talked to some of the other cities because the donor is interested in this being something that Dallas can look and see how it compares to El Paso, to San Antonio,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Get Laura on board.
All right. Well, did you have anything else, Tim?
No, thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So with that, we'll hand it over to Zoe.
Great, thank you. Share the screen. All right. So hi everyone, my name is Zoe Accondino. I'm a regional planning data analyst at MAPC in Boston. And this was a research project that we did with Housing Navigator Massachusetts. And just a little bit of background on Housing Navigator for those who are unfamiliar. They maintain a database of affordable housing in Massachusetts that is designed to work as kind of like a Zillow for affordable housing, but it gives us a really unique opportunity to be able to look at all affordable housing together in kind of one data set with consistent data on eligibility, by income, age restriction, and the size of the unit. So they were really interested in trying to figure out what that could tell us about the needs for affordable housing in Massachusetts. And they came together with us to look at this question of how many low-income renter households are not being served by affordable housing. So our top level finding was that 68% of low-income renters, which we define as less than 80% of the area median income where they live, fall into this affordable housing gap. And that's about 441,000 households across Massachusetts. And we define these households in the gap as unstably housed, meaning that they are not being served by income restricted affordable housing and therefore particularly vulnerable to rent increases, condo conversions, housing speculation, high degrees of rent burden, and overcrowding in order to afford rent. So to go through our analysis and our findings, I'll take 3 examples of low-income households that we find in our data, and we used PUM's data to really understand these different characteristics of households across the state. And we did the analysis at the state level and at the regional planning agency level, so we could see how this plays out differently in different places. But we did find it was pretty consistent in the breakdown. So our first household was a parent and child 3-person household looking for a 2-bedroom in Amherst, Massachusetts, with an income of $31,000, which would make them a very low income household based on HUD income limits. Our second household is a retired older adult in Bolton, which is a kind of small suburb. And if they make the average of Social Security income, they would be making about $21,000 a year, which would make them an extremely low income household by those HUD income limits. And then our third example is 3 roommates in Everett, which is a city outside of Boston, with a combined income of $100,000 per year, which would make them a moderately low income household. So starting off with this question of deeply affordable housing for a family, they might face a choice between 2 different kinds of units that by income they are eligible for. And these are the 2 different rent types for affordable housing in our data set. So the rent based on income, or RBI unit, would be perfect for this family as they're making less than 50% AMI, and they would be only paying $780 a month, which is affordable, so they wouldn't be rent burdened. But the way that this income eligibility works for rent based on income posed a problem for our analysis because we wouldn't be able to tell that these units set at 80% AMI are actually serving the need for deeply affordable housing. The other challenge, both for our analysis and for households who are looking for affordable housing, is the fixed below market rent units. They might be on paper eligible for as they make less than 60% AMI, but because that rent is set at the maximum that the property manager could set it at, they would be severely cost burdened living even in an affordable unit. So we also didn't want to assume that these units are meeting the need for that deep affordability. So in order to address this in our analysis, we turned to HUD's picture of affordable housing to get a sense of how households by income group are distributed across public housing, which is mostly what RBI units are. And then Housing Navigator interviewed some folks who are housing providers to get a sense of how they actually administer these fixed below market rent units, and found that there is a window of opportunity of about 10% AMI, which in this case would make this household ineligible for this fixed below market rent unit as they wouldn't have a high enough income. And that led us to some interesting findings about how rent type shapes the gap for affordable housing. So by these income groups, again, based on the HUD income limits, very low income households have the least access to affordable housing. because there isn't enough rent based on income units to meet that need for deep affordability, and the rent fixed below market rate units are not set at low enough affordability measures to meet that need. So rent based on income units mostly go towards extremely low income households, and the rent fixed below market rate units mainly go towards the moderately low income households, but very low income households like this Amherst family are kind of lost in the middle. We also looked at unit size based on standard occupancy regulations and found that the families of kind of 2 to 4 people with children who are looking for 2 to 3 bedroom households face a gap of 2 households per available unit. So the next household type are older adults. And in addition to those rent type choices, older adults also face a choice for age restricted versus non-age restricted units, which pose an additional challenge as they are often on fixed incomes and extremely low income. So they are in the group of 194,000 low income households who are unstably housed because the rent is simply not affordable. But for small households, like a single older person, there's an additional challenge for the 1 bedroom type. So for older adult households, there are 3 households per suitable unit where the household is a single person or a couple. And for non-older adult households, and these are folks who are less than 60, there's a gap of 4 households per available unit. Now, we know also that not all older adults are going to live in age-restricted housing. So when we actually combine the number of older adults who don't have access to an affordable unit with that pool of folks who are ineligible for an age-restricted unit, we actually find that there is a gap for these small households of 6 households per available small unit. And that is the largest gap for any of the household types based on kind of standard occupancy standards. But it gets even more complicated because there's a geographic component to this as well. That 25% of Massachusetts cities and towns have more than 75% of their affordable housing age restricted. And in some cases, 100% of that affordable housing is age restricted. So if a senior or has to take care of a grandchild, for example, they wouldn't be able to live in age-restricted housing. And we would have an additional challenge of helping folks stay in their community, support their families, and be able to kind of make those choices that's right for them. Another issue, using our projections, we found that older adults are the small older adult household type is the largest type of household in low income households in Massachusetts, and it's likely to grow the most, which is the same story for extremely low income households. So this need is very acute and it is likely to increase. And one last aspect of our gap that we explored goes beyond supply and into how affordable housing is actually administered. So again, using those occupancy standards, we were able to type the different affordable housing units with household characteristics that would be eligible for them. So small households are going to look for 1 bedrooms, medium households are going to look for 2 and 3 bedrooms, but a household of 3 adults who are not related, or even if they are cousins, siblings, are not going to be eligible for affordable housing as it is currently administered, because roommates just aren't something that a lot of housing providers are willing to kind of rent to, because it creates more administrative challenges. And this is about 15% of all of the low income households in Massachusetts fall into this administratively ineligible gap. And that might include multi-generational households and non-traditional family structures, as well as roommates. And we just don't know whether folks are choosing to live in roommate situations because they want to or for financial reasons. But either way, even if we had all of the housing to fill that gap today, there would still be this 95,000 households who wouldn't have access to an affordable unit. So really quickly, our kind of suggestions for solutions are deepen and build more affordable housing, and address some of these administrative and geographic disparities. We also want to better understand some of the overlap between income and household composition, some of the other aspects like accessibility and the role of mobile rental vouchers we didn't have the data for. So as we get that data, we'd love to be able to build that in. And then all sorts of other aspects related to this gap, especially naturally occurring affordable housing, regional nuances, and our projections. And we have a story map and a lot of interactive data tools to really help dig in further on this that I will share in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Zoe. All right, we want to make sure that everybody has time to present, but we do have a few minutes for questions. Anybody has?
Zoe, a quick question for me, and this I've
Yeah.
was able to see this presentation twice. It's really neat work, Zoe. At the very beginning, you talked about vulnerable to rent increases. Can you just say a teeny bit about how you define that mechanically?
Yeah, so that's kind of it's less technical and more just kind of an understanding of how market rents work in our region in particular, where we know that for the most part, folks are already severely rent burdened and unable to access market rents. You know, you can look at the kind of line for the median 2-bedroom and see that it is well above what is affordable to the median renter in most cases. And that's, you know, at the middle, we're talking about below the median here. So, right, that family in Amherst who can afford a $780 a month rent, they're not able to access market rents. And even if they are able to find naturally occurring affordable housing, due to housing speculation and other pressures on the rental market, at any point, that kind of rental increase would put them at risk of displacement and even more severe rent burden. So that's kind of where we were approaching that of the key for this as income restricted affordable housing means you are protected from those rent increases.
Just to make sure I'm tracking, so does that mean that anybody renting not income restricted housing is just automatically counted as vulnerable to rent increases?
For the purposes of our analysis, yes. And that's one of the reasons why we want to bring in mobile vouchers and better understand the role of naturally occurring affordable housing, because we know that, you know, cost burden is not necessarily 100%. But there are real risks from a variety of sources that you know, if we want to pursue building affordable housing as the way to create more housing stability, and perhaps it is a bit provocative to say that everyone is unstably housed, but I think that is kind of the nature of the housing crisis.
I have a question. I know that you talk about income restricted housing, what's the overlap between income restricted and deed restricted? Like, can those restrictions be lifted?
So that gets into kind of the source of the affordability. And a lot of those deed restricted units are going to be that fixed below market rent. Those are the ones that are going to be created through inclusionary zoning. Through Massachusetts has a 40B process that incentivizes the creation of affordable housing through deed restriction. But as we found, the deep affordability for those extremely low and very low income households is actually through the rent based on income, which are often funded through project-based vouchers, which often get combined in like LIHTC developments as well. So there's like state and federally funded project-based vouchers, and those are what really create that. So it's not deed restricted, but it is still a funded affordability that is income restricted.
Okay. And are landlords allowed to discriminate by funding source in Massachusetts or no? Like, can they refuse vouchers?
They legally no, but that certainly does still happen. And
right.
the mobile
Well, in
vouchers,
Texas, you legally can.
right.
So I'm just.
Oh, wow. Well.
Yeah. Yeah. You can just say we don't take vouchers. So that's why I was asking.
Well, the other challenge for mobile vouchers is you do have to be, the rent has to be at or below the fair market rent set by the kind of local housing authority. So for most market rents, they're not going to be able to use that mobile voucher in kind of your standard apartment. So that's another challenge. And actually, a lot of times the mobile vouchers are used to make those fixed below market rents affordable. So that Amherst family, if they had a mobile voucher, they could take that to that 60% AMI household or unit and make it affordable to them. So that's kind of an overlap that we're not really able to tease out with our current data, but something that we would absolutely love to be able to do.
All right. Well, thanks, Zoe. We are starting to come up on time here. So if anybody has any other questions, you can just put them in the chat, maybe Zoe can answer those.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thanks.
otherwise, I'll turn it over to Luke.
Cool. Thanks, Cole. I'm experimenting with sharing my screen in a different way. Let's see if I get this right. Oh, I already did not get it right.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, that's why I figured I could experiment with you all. All right. And then one more step on my end. So are you guys seeing just the regular slides now?
Yep.
Great. Awesome. So just a note about Boston indicators. So over the years that I've been here, I've learned through interactions with the NNIP network that the partner groups are just really diverse. And I think in recent years, Boston indicators has become, even more atypical than some. We still do some sort of classic indicators work. We do an annual Greater Boston Housing Report Card, for instance. But more and more, we're functioning like a local think tank. And being embedded at the Boston Foundation, which is the main community foundation for Greater Boston, has been a great home for doing this kind of nimble, responsive, think tanky work research. And the report I'm going to show some just highlights from here is, I think, a good example of that. A few of us on the indicators team, I don't know, 3 years ago now, read Richard Reeves's book of Boys and Men, which I suspect many of you might be familiar with. And we just, in our travels, started noticing manifestations of these challenges facing boys and men in a bunch of different ways after reading the book. Me, at a very personal level, I have twin second grade boys who are in public schools in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I hadn't appreciated the fact that they hadn't had any male teachers in the 4 years they had been in public school. They've had one male specialist who was their gym teacher. There's no other male classroom educator in their whole K-8 school. And before reading the book, I kind of just assumed that was normal. But the kind of thing we learned through that book is that actually the gender divide in K-12 education, in terms of teaching, has gotten worse over the last generation rather than getting better or at least staying level. So when Richard Reeves left Brookings to found the American Institute for Boys and Men, we just cooked up the idea that, maybe they'd be interested in doing some local sort of applications of their research. So we reached out to them out of the blue. They responded immediately. And this report that we released in March is actually the first local deep dive that they've done as part of their national effort. So I guess just in the interest of time, let me just jump into some of the findings. This is real select snapshots of what was probably a 30-minute presentation we gave at a report launch. But I'll do the quick examples of some of the data we pulled together, and then hopefully leave more time for discussion, because I'd be really curious for people's reactions. I'll say, maybe not surprisingly, well, we just got a lot of positive responses from people who recognize these challenges, but there definitely was a subset of people who, and even ourselves on staff, ourselves like sort of cringed a little bit, like, really, you're gonna do a report focused entirely on the needs of boys and men when the challenges facing women and girls are still so persistent and unresolved in many domains. And so we tried to wrestle that throughout the course of the work, and anyhow, would be curious for people's responses. But let me get into the data. So we organized the report into 4 main sections: physical health, mental health, education, and employment and wages. On physical health, I'll just start with a data point that I think is pretty much common knowledge, that men live shorter lives than women. But I don't think we usually pause to think about what a sobering fact of life that really is. This graph breaks that data out by race, and you can see the racial gaps between men and women are especially large for Black and Latino residents of Massachusetts. A theme throughout the report is that when you disaggregate on multiple dimensions, sort of by gender, and then also by race, and then also by income, class, looking at education, is where the divides really grow largest. Something we had wished we did before the Word document went to our designer for PDF layout was to break this out by college attainment. The next graph is something we just pulled from a Brookings report that shows it doesn't unfortunately disaggregate by gender here, but it shows in recent years how much life expectancy has the gap has widened between those with a college degree and those without. I think if we were to get this data and additionally break out by gender with a college degree and without, you'd see that widening even further. Not surprising to you, I'm sure, there's huge gender gap in terms of opioid deaths. We saw a little bit of progress in recent years, which is good, but the gap between male and female opioid-related overdose deaths needs to be very high. And then when you look at it by race, you see there's actually been, modest, steady progress for overdose deaths for white men in the last couple of years. But Black opioid overdose deaths continue to increase, and Latino male opioid overdose deaths, remain very high. Transition to mental health. I really felt like although maybe the discourse is catching up in recent years, but it's felt like the specific challenges facing men's mental health were not, prominent in discussions. And a quick anecdote: Boston Indicators, we released a research brief 2 years ago now that looked at youth mental health challenges in Boston in particular. And one of the top line findings there was data showing that girls in Boston were experiencing much higher rates of sadness and suicidal ideation than boys. What we totally missed in that was the story almost entirely flips when you look at actual suicide deaths. And so here is the data on suicide deaths by gender in Massachusetts. And you can see, male suicide deaths several times greater than female. Also broke this out by age, and you can see how much higher the suicide death rates are for middle age, and then especially older men. Our sense is a lot of this has to do with social isolation, again, especially for older men, just being very disconnected. And you can see how much those rates skyrocket for senior men in particular. On education, just highlight a few sort of pieces of historical context here. Girls and women obviously face really significant educational barriers a couple generations ago. Title IX really helped spur equality, and we've seen tremendous gains in access to all sorts of educational opportunities for women and girls. What's interesting is the gender gap in bachelor's degrees in particular has almost literally reversed in the last generation or so, where the big concern several decades ago was about a 60-40 split in terms of male-female representation in colleges, and now that's roughly flipped. Greater Boston in particular, our K-12 schools rank very high. Boys do well compared to boys elsewhere in the country, but gender gaps still favor girls and women, especially by the later grades. So one of the interesting stories when you look across the pipeline in education is at the earliest grades, boys in Massachusetts actually outperform girls a little bit. Those gaps sort of close and then open in the reverse by high school, especially on reading for girls. Where the gaps really widen is into college and then for post-secondary success and beyond, sort of across the pipeline. So these graphs sort of show that story a little bit. So here's NAEP data for boys compared to girls in Massachusetts. And you see Massachusetts boys, even by 8th grade, are still outperforming girls on math, but that's flipped on reading. Here's another graph that shows a sort of another dimension of widening inequality. This just compares NAEP reading scores across the distribution of scores, and you can see a big divergence where the highest performing boys in Massachusetts actually have continued to get better, but in the last 20 years or so, boys at the 25th percentile of distribution and 10th percentile have seen real declines. This is gaps through high school growing, sort of emerging in a more consistent way for a bunch of key measures of course completion, four-year graduation rate. Gaps not nearly as large as in mental health and and physical health that I showed earlier, which is an important caveat to this. But where the gaps get most concerning is really into college. So this looks at high school graduates in Massachusetts attending different types of institutions of higher ed. And you can see girl high school graduates in Massachusetts, significantly more likely to attend any college or university, and the gap's largest for private four-years. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but in the second cluster, 8 percentage points higher, more likely to attend private four-year for girls versus boys. And then this is a graph looking at college attainment for young adults in the workforce, and you can see right around 1990, the lines met, and then a sort of gradually increasing gap for females, young females in the workforce having a college degree or more up till today. And they'll end, similarly very quickly on employment and wages. Just a little bit of context here. None of this is going to be really surprising. We've seen a big shift away from sort of male-coded blue-collar jobs over the last several decades. Those jobs used to offer more stable employment. The high-growth fields are increasingly requiring college degrees. And this really impacts not only employment and wages, but also the health and identity, the sense of belonging and worth. And as male-coded jobs have declined more, that's been a bigger challenge for men, and in a way has, I think, played into some of the real big persistent challenges in our politics in recent years. Here's some just data on that. Real significant increases in workforce participation among women. The male workforce participation rate is still a little bit higher than women's, but that gap has closed very significantly over the last generation or so. This is that same data, but also breaking out by college attainment, and you can see again how much a bigger issue there is for men and also for women, but especially declining for men without a college degree. This looks at wage growth, comparing by gender and then with a BA and without, and you can see pretty flat increases for those without, but we see pretty consistent wage increases for those with a college degree, whether male or female. Here's racial gaps, and this is somewhat consistent across a lot of the work we've done, is where we see outcomes for Asian Americans actually outpacing even white workers in this case, but Black and Latino workers, far below both white and Asian And then this is a teaser. This is kind of a dense graph, but this looks at net change in available jobs by industry and gender over about 20 years in Greater Boston. And you can see loosely, this is not a perfectly consistent story, but loosely greater declines for male-dominated industries and a little bit more of an increase for female-dominated, especially in healthcare, social assistance, and education. So one of the things that Richard Reeves and American Institute for Boys and Men have really been stressing is workforce training opportunities, educational opportunities that get the post-secondary pipeline stronger for young men to enter what they're calling healing occupations, getting into nursing jobs, getting into teaching, other educational service jobs is one way to encourage men to get into, stronger middle-class jobs in a way that they had opportunities to in the past with manufacturing and blue-collar jobs that are really going by the wayside. So I will stop sharing my screen with that. What am I doing?
All right. Thank you very much.
Is that still sharing, Cole?
Yeah. It's out of presenter mode, but you're still sharing your screen. Well, yeah, I know we're a little over time, but
there we go.
If people are still here, they might be able to stay for just a couple more minutes. If anyone has any questions.
Did you drop the link to that in the chat too, Luke?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more detail in the full report, obviously.
You ran through a lot.
Oh, you know what? I sent that to Meet NNIP. There we go.
Great, thanks.
I'm curious, Luke, what kind of you see as, maybe, like what do we do with this information? What's the path forward? If I were, whoever, public entity in the Boston area, what kind of thing might you tell me I ought to do?
Yeah, good question. Two quick thoughts. One is I suspect all of us on this call, when we're doing different versions of the reports we produce, wrestle with like, okay, what's the action agenda? And, does every report need like a problem section and a policy solution section? And for what it's worth, I personally have come down on feeling like not every report needs to have the action section. Like a good diagnosis of a problem is a real contribution in its own right. And frankly, there's a real risk, I think, and we have been guilty of this, of spending 90% of our time doing a really good diagnosis of a problem and then sort of half-assing an action section that's not really useful because it's not in depth enough anyway. So I hope we're all comfortable sometimes just not doing that last section, because the research we're doing is one part of a broader sort of theory of change. On this one, that said, something that was neat about the release event we had is, since, like I said, our research center is embedded at the Community Foundation for Greater Boston, and the program department funds, by definition, a lot of community efforts to do things. And there was a lot of interest from workforce training groups. There's a lot of mentoring groups that have actually for years, some people think, oh, this is a provocative take that, you folk concerned about boys and men. And then others are like, this is nothing new at all. We've done youth mentoring for young men of color in Boston for decades, and it's just a tough, persistent problem. So anyhow, it's all to say, I think on the sort of nonprofit side, there is a growing conversation in Greater Boston around how to make sure we're doing the right sort of job training mentorship programs for young men, especially young men of color, and shifting the strategies to meet a changing economy.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think defining a problem is a really important part of it. I guess then, absent the sort of solution suggestion, I guess my question is, you've outlined excuse me, you've outlined sort of empirically what's happening. I guess then my ask would be, why is this a problem? And like 30 years ago, were we worried that women weren't getting degrees? Like, why does it matter that men aren't getting degrees? Why does it matter that men don't have jobs? So like, like, why is this a problem? I guess would be then my question. If not, how do we solve it?
I'm curious if you mean that question to me because you're really not sure if it is a problem, or because the presentation of the work didn't lead with the why in a clear way.
I think both. Like, I don't think I don't think that it is a foregone conclusion that men not having, that women having higher educational attainment is bad. Um, and
So
and so I guess
just
that's,
quickly on that, to be clear,
yeah.
I think, and the whole research team working on this thinks the fact that women have, over the last couple of generations, achieved much higher levels of educational attainment as a very good thing. And so, the perspective we wanted to take here was very positive sum. And the idea that if there are men dropping out of the workforce, for instance, and that like the efforts to something Richard talks about, I think really persuasively, is there were a bunch of efforts in the last 20 years or so to encourage mentorship and support for young women and girls to get into STEM careers. And that's the kind of effort that really helped boost, certainly not perfectly, but or at least close some of the gender gaps in science, technology, engineering jobs. And that we should learn from that to do something parallel to make sure that men have a wider horizon in terms of the occupations they might consider going into also.
I think there's an interesting question building on that for industries that have been historically dominated by women, they're also historically underpaid. So, does that expensive college degree to go into a historically underpaid industry actually give you that like economic mobility and freedom that we assume higher education creates? And I think that's kind of that like question I think a lot of folks are asking themselves as they look at huge sticker prices for college of where is this going to take me and what are my options? Um, and yeah, I think the idea that we're in like a new economy that is more gender balanced but still holds all of the like problems of the past is creating some new externalities for men. Um, is a very like complicated and nuanced thing that it's good to have the data to start teasing apart.
Yeah. Yeah, K-12 teaching, I think, is an interesting example of that, where we sort of free ride it as a society on way underpaying women teachers. And we got some, amazing, the top talent among women going into K-12 education. And, the solution we need going forward is far better pay for all teachers to make sure we're getting the top talent again across both genders.
All right. Well, I know we went longer than usual, but fortunately we're recording this so we can share this out for anyone who had to miss at the end or couldn't be here. But yeah, so I know Tim left, but Zoe and Luke, thank you so much. We appreciate sharing your insights today. And we'll see everyone at the next one.